Okay, this flashes up. We've got quite a lot here, haven't we? Okay, so we can see here that recruitment and skills, finance, investment, government direction, hopefully that's been answered to some extent. Decarbonisation is up there, technology transition, collaboration. These are all be mentioned, I think, in many of the presentations, but also ring true. And I think this is actually quite a very helpful signposting for our panel to address some of the questions at hand. So if I may, just kick off with the first question. Rod, I think we'll throw this to you first, if that's okay, and to all the members of the panel. Listening from you all today, there's obviously a shared vision of the future of this sector and how it can head. I think it's fair to say that we all are aware that it's not going to be that easy from many of the speakers today. So I'd be interested to hear from all the panelists, really what are the key hurdles that government and industry need to overcome in the short term to achieve this shared vision for the sector. Rod, could we have your view on that, please?
Absolutely. Very happy to go first. I think
Thank you.
all the panelists throughout the morning have highlighted numerous challenges and hurdles that we need to address collectively. So I'll just sort of summarise maybe a top 5 or so from me. The first, I think, we've repeatedly talked about the importance of genuine collaboration, but I'm going to emphasise the word genuine as well. I think sometimes collaboration can feel quite transactional. We hear problems. Do we actually listen to each other? Do we actually truly understand what we want to achieve? So I think there's an openness from us in the NSO, from Bex, from the whole panel to be genuinely collaborative, and from my team as well. So I'd say that. I think we've all touched upon perception. I think perception of the sector, how it's perceived by our kids, our parents, parents of children, I should say, across Whitehall, externally as well. So I think there's a really significant challenge there that we have to work collectively to overcome. Money, I think it's absolutely obvious that money and, by extension, the way government supports and incentivises, and absolutely agree wholeheartedly with what Charlotte said there as well. And then for me, final 2 would be skills. Paul summarised the breadth of the skills challenge that we have to work together on. And then very finally, one of the constant refrains I hear is the delta between building in the UK compared to being built in Europe and globally. So how are we going to work collectively to overcome that hurdle or address it, or frankly, just be aware of it and recognise the challenge and recognise maybe that means that we have to take a harder view on what we compete against, or what are we able to do to close realistically that delta that exists.
Fantastic, thank you, Rod. Bex, from the Ensign perspective, is there anything you would like to add on that, or in terms of your sort of top priority?
Yeah, so I think there was a lot of key things there that were brought out, and I think there was a mention earlier about a pie and the size of the pie as well. And I think it is working collaboratively to make sure that size of the pie increases, and we're not, as opposed to trying to get more of a very finite element. Obviously, funding is always going to be an issue, so we need, and also resources. And when we talk about skills, it's so important.
Yes.
And even in the public sector, even the resources to manage the defence business is such an issue at the moment that we need to understand how we can work more effectively and work on those interfaces. Maybe something that wasn't mentioned as much and probably more poignant to in service and support what I'm on is the data. I think we need to understand how we can get our data in a better place going forwards, and our commercial stand back and our ways of working in the MOD, so that we can adapt and be a better authority going forwards.
Fantastic, thanks, very good answer. Skills, Paul.
Yeah, so I've worked on about them enough. I think I was really struck by what Charlotte said, and I think there's something about this which is, we both use the same phrase, we're an island nation. Do we want to have shipbuilding that extends beyond the critical security needs of our naval vessels? And then following on from that, what Charlotte said about UK content, I want my taxpayers' money to go to things that are built in the UK. I want my taxpayers' money to go into the investment of making that sector stronger, more efficient, more competitive. It's existential. I want that to be the case so that an island nation has the ability to make its own maritime vessels. And I think the bit beyond that then is nothing will solve a skills problem faster than clear line of sight to the opportunity and the purchase orders that will help pay for the investment that needs to be made. Yeah. So, it's really easy to sit here. It's really simple. If only that was the case. But yeah, that would be my ask.
Yes, great. I mean, like, as Charlotte mentioned around, the entire new sectors around offshore wind, which are a huge opportunity for the UK. It seems almost crazy that we cannot capitalise as a nation on those kind of brand new businesses that are coming, and more businesses that are being driven by the blue economy as well. Charlotte, you gave a very powerful presentation, very clear. Is there anything else around that question you would like to sort of add?
Nothing really more to add, really. But I think skills is most definitely up there, and the cyclical nature of it. There are peaks and troughs in boat building, and specifically, and we've had to diversify the organisation to pull through those troughs, quite honestly. And we're involved as marine engineering and marine renewal projects, etc., etc., etc. But having the pipeline and this real need to see the bigger picture. I do not believe there is one yard in this room or in the UK that would not want a piece of the pie. And if we can think of it as a collaborative and actually generally work together, it will help even out those peaks and troughs. Yes. But in terms of the skills thing, there is a romanticism in this sector that we were talking about earlier. And yards, there's this idea that they're kind of seaweed sodden and it's all really old hat. These vessels are wonderful, and having something built that is tangible, that is later set to sea, set sail to sea, is really inspiring. And if we can capture the imagination of the young people, I really do feel that we can overcome that major challenge at the moment.
Fantastic. So attractiveness of the sector, effectively, to the younger generation, which is a massive one. Fantastic. Thank you. So following up on that, I think we come into the tangible things that can be done in the near term. And again, if you could all give your thoughts about that. What in the near term, what can be done? What are the first steps? Rod, I'm going to throw you right in front of this question, if that's okay. That's first off.
Thank you. So near term, I think, is interesting about how we define it. What are my priorities as Chief Executive in the near term? The first is absolutely with the new government in place to make sure that we have their ear, that as I and then my team, I thought hopefully really well explained, the critical importance that we can demonstrate shipbuilding has to economic growth, to prosperity, to the jobs agenda, as others have alluded to. So top of my priorities is to make sure that we gain and grow that political and ministerial buy-in in shipbuilding against an awful lot of competing industries. Aspirationally, maybe not immediately, I'd like to grow the NSO's capability to have more tools in our toolbox to do even more than we're able to do now. Quite a lot of what we're able to do now is around influencing and engagement, and I'd love to have more direct interventionist powers, if I was quite honest as well. And then it's going to get boring, Peter. I think the final thing I'd say in the near term is the message of collaboration, of being really laser focused, though, on what we're going to get after. One of my worries is that we have a very wide-ranging sector, a brilliant sector, but we try and get after so much. And one of my sort of key aspirations for the near term is to be really laser focused on what it is we're actually determined to achieve.
Brilliant. Thanks, Rod. I think that genuine collaboration came loud and clear as well. Charlotte, from your perspective, first steps.
I probably want to add to that. I do genuinely see that there is a need for involvement, and I think what my personal perspective on this is that for this sector, a lot of it is in general coastal communities, very isolated and somewhat deprived. I mean, Pembroke Dock is a very deprived ward that I'm living in. Well, most of the South Wales coast is, but if we can really home in on the fact that this sector involves a array of different trades, as well as more traditional, as well as the more sophisticated electrical, mechanical, navigation, communication, I think we've got a really fantastic story to save here, and that will take everybody in the room to be part of that story. So, yeah, I back you there completely.
Great, thanks. Paul?
I will return to skills. I think you could choose a number of things, but I think it's been said a few times, with change comes opportunity. We have a new government. I quoted earlier on that, unfortunately, in England and Wales, apprenticeships are 40% less than they were before the levy came. I know that that's on the UK government's radar. I think that's a massive opportunity. I know they probably will want to be considered about that to make sure they don't just jump in. I'd urge them to be considered and rapid at the same time. It becomes the baseboard, because although then it gets complex, because with the skills being devolved to the other 3 nations, that then comes to them through the block grant. But there are a few things. So colleagues in Northern Ireland talk about an opportunity because there's a reset on the assembly, and therefore they've used the phrase blank sheet of paper. So from a skills point of view, that's really a quite exciting kind of place to go. For us in Scotland, we have some fundamentals to fix about the balance of where the spend in skills go. 2% of our education and skills budget for work-based learning is simply not enough, and it's not meeting the demand, and it's not keeping up. And the way we sell that to them is that you're going to miss the opportunity of a lifetime, because there is a case for an industrial-sized revolution over the next decade and beyond in the UK and more generally. And I think same for Wales. That mechanism that comes through, how the levy is restructured should bring opportunity, for those.
Yes,
so that'd be my pick.
Fantastic, thank you, Paul. Bex, from an ensign perspective.
Yeah, I think the key step for us are sort of opportunities like this. Like, we're working with the NSO at the moment to understand what work they've been doing, what we can embed into contracts, and this conversation is all about how we work collaboratively into how we can make those authority contracts and tendering process incorporate and develop.
Great. So it sounds like you actually mentioned it well in turning the pavement into a motorway in essence for the volume of opportunity that's coming. And actually, I think being on the starting blocks with this great opportunity of change that we have gives us a unique moment in time. And in many ways, it feels like sort of North Sea oil in 1967 or something, where it's a whole new opportunity landscape that's opened up, and it's there for the taking, definitely. And speaking of there for the taking, we have many Slido questions, so I'd like to change over to the sliders, if we may, and take questions from the audience. Thank you very much for the questions you've put across. We'll look at these screens because that's just too big. And quite frankly, I've still got retinal burnout after James's stakeholder slide, which was phenomenal, frightening, and very bright. So, okay, so let's go through some of these. So we'll start with the easy one. Totally agree with all Charlotte asks. Well said. I think you might be coming back next year, Charlotte, in that case. Is Mainstay's issue with government... Oh, sorry, there we go. Is Mainstay's issue with government tenders an issue being tackled by the NSO in the T&C's work that was mentioned?
So I can come back on that, and happy to, Peter.
Thanks.
I think Charlotte mentioned the work that we are doing, specifically looking at refund guarantees.
Yes.
That is something that we are very aware of, and aware of the challenge that presents across the sector.
Yes.
We are absolutely engaged with the majority of, if not all, government tenders, and I think it's reasonable to say, and actually, I know this is a sort of difficult thing to hear. Quite a lot of what we do, you don't see. You don't actually understand the pain that my team and I go to try and have that conversation about some of the words and some of the things that go out in tender documentation, and actually, questions around build experience. Have you built X number of vessels in the last X number of years? And we understand why those questions might be sensible from a commercial perspective sometimes, but we're trying to do our best to manage that and to give UK companies as much opportunity to be there at the start of the process. So I'd say there, I hope we are tackling a lot of what Charlotte mentioned in her speech. What she alluded to, which is a really interesting point, is the way government engages over tendering and risk appetite, even from that sort of industry engagement that Charlotte was talking about in terms of NDAs. And I know absolutely which program she's talking about, and I want to stay employed as a chief executive, so I won't comment on that in any great detail here. But I absolutely get the frustration with that, and it's a frustration that we try and share back with the program teams, and we try and talk to them about how best to engage. I think there was one item that Charlotte talked to, which is a little bit more of interest to me, and I've noted it down and we'll take it away, which is we're not really an organisation that's going to set requirements, what the vessel requirements are, but I absolutely get the point that when you're going out new to tender, if you're going to give companies any sense of what they're bidding for, then they need to know what the requirements are. We have said that. We've talked about it to some of the things that we see, but we don't really have responsibility for it. I hope that, sorry, that was quite long-winded, but hopefully that answers the question.
That's good, thank you. Charlotte, would you like to add to that? Or?
No, I think, as I said, I do understand. I mean, it is very difficult for local authorities or public sector bodies who'd only tendered 10 to 15 years on a replacement vessel. This isn't something that they're going to do day to day. It's very specific, and there are a lot of parameters to take into consideration, not just from the yard's perspective, but also the vessel itself. And actually, very recently we were asked to tender, and we were given the general arrangement drawing, but actually I had to specifically ask, can I have the instructions to tender? Yes. Do you want a build schedule? Do you want to risk, do you want us to do some risk assurance? Do you want a payment schedule? And actually there is a little bit of hand-holding that needs to happen here, I think, from a public sector's, a government sector's point of view as well, to support yards to be able to navigate it a lot easier than currently, really. So, yeah.
Brilliant. Thank you, Charlotte. The next question, thank you, is they're jumping around, which is fantastic. Ensign, is this backed by the new S of S for Defence, the first Sea Lord? It's a pretty straight yes or no, that one, isn't it? Actually?
So this hasn't been put in front of the new Secretary of State for Defence yet. We obviously have our strategic outline case, which has been approved, but we are currently, as I said, in concept phase and devising the solutions, at which point it will go through to approvals next year. Reference First Sea Lord, we have our sponsor boards, which are our key sponsors is Second Sea Lord, and he will be briefing it up as such. And our preferred solution of Expand has been endorsed by Second Sea Lord as such.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you, Bex. We've got a question here, which is, I think what's still missing from the presentations from NSO is the importance of subsystem/technology, i.e. sensors, and C4 ISR. How are you supporting those organisations?
I mean, my first guilty...
Sorry, Rod, these do bounce back also,
I thought that might happen. So, I mean, my honest first answer is I don't even know what C4 ISR is. So, maybe that shows my inadequacy as a starting point. I think, look, what we tried to say, I'd hoped that the message that came through in the presentations from the team is we are absolutely trying to support the wider environment about shipbuilding. We're not just interested in the sort of metal bashing and the larger shipyards. We, of course, engage with them as well. They have an absolutely critical role to play, and a critical role as primes in how they engage with the supply chain as well. The short answer is we're trying, but I have a relatively, well, I'm conscious of this audience and how I say this. I have a relatively small team who are working incredibly hard, and I was incredibly proud, actually, of how they engage today already, and I asked them to come here and talk to near 200 people about what we're trying to do. So we're up for it. We're up for engaging about the totality of the shipbuilding landscape. But as I sort of said, bear with us a bit. Do engage with us. We're trying, and maybe there's something about how we balance our focus and shift our focus away from looking like Roni, focused on the big shipyards, and we're trying to do that too, and that's something I'm committed to do as Chief Executive.
Fantastic, thank you. And I think that, yes, of course.
I was just going to add one into that, if that's okay. I think it's a really good question. I think it's one of the reasons why, when we were sitting down as a skills delivery group, skills foresighting came up early in the conversation, and I think it's an interesting one that it factors in as well. When we talk about skills, although we are incredibly focused on shipbuilding for the UK, it's the same picture everywhere else, and so the same challenges of how many people and the skills that it takes them to operate vessels, it ties really well into that, subsistence technology and so on. Is one of the reasons why that skills foresighting came up so early in the conversation about our priorities to work on. But I think it's absolutely right. It's efficiency and automation wherever we can is going to be part of the solution to a UK, where we're really struggling for skills, if we're honest.
Yeah, and I think with the other sessions that we've got today and tomorrow, all these major sort of mega trends around decarbonisation, digitalisation, autonomy, they all blend together. So you might have to expand the stakeholder map to a few more colours as well, I think. Fantastic, thank you very much. Next question, since the NSO has been established, how many vessels of the 30-year pipeline have been built in the UK?
I guess this is coming back to me again.
I think it's got Rod. It's a non-anagram for Rod.
Thanks for that. Look, the 30-year pipeline is exactly what it says. It's a 30-year pipeline. Yeah. It has, I think, over 150 vessels on it over the next 30 years. There are, everything on that pipeline across the totality of the government programme. So you have got in-build things like the Type 31, the Type 26. You've got the work that is being undertaken to advance the development of fleet solid support. That's all work that is continuing. Yes. There are a number of government programmes which are out there at different stages of the tender process, like the Border Force Replacement Programme, like the work that CFAS are doing as well. So there are a number of but they're at an early stage or a different stage of development. Then there's multiple vessels across the totality of the country, including the likes of Scottish Marine vessels, future General Lighthouse Authority vessels as well, that I should have alluded to as well. There's a lot on there, so quite a lot of the vessels in there. Are they being built in the UK yet? Yes, in the case of 31 and 26. I didn't just announce a new Navy programme. Don't all get horrified by that, because I definitely would get into trouble for that. So 31 and 26, but there's a lot on there at different stages of development. I get the question. I get where it's coming from. I'm going to turn it around slightly, though, and be a bit challenging back, which is to say the government is a challenging customer. I've got that loud and clear from a lot of the messages I've heard today. The pipeline also in itself is challenging, and I get that, and we understand that about the long-term certainty we're able to provide. So I get there are challenges. So I just question the reliance on the pipeline, on the government contracts vis-a-vis commercial opportunities as well. I get the absolute point that they're hand in hand, but I don't want to just look to the pipeline as being the answer for what's being built in the UK.
Yeah. Great, thank you, Rod. I'm very conscious of time. We've got a lot more questions here, but also there's opportunity now to open to the floor for people who didn't want to submit their questions by the phone. So can I ask, is there anyone in the audience who would like to, we can't see very much because we've just got the lights coming, but is there anyone in the audience who, there we go, thank you, magical, in the audience who would like to ask a question directly? Yes, please, gentlemen here, if we could provide, if you could give your name, company, and then question, please. That'd be much appreciated.
Thank you, panel. Darren Jones from Solihull. Low volume, high capital manufacturing in a highly regulated industry. Sound familiar? Well, that's also aerospace, where Britain punches above its weight. So why doesn't it in maritime?
I've got a feeling that might come to you, Rod, first. You certainly earned your lunch today.
There's a whacking great clock that tells us how long we have. If I talk for the next 5 minutes, then I'll filibuster successfully. It's an absolutely spot-on question. From my perspective, in government, as I said in my speech as well, I actually think there's an awful lot we can learn from, adapt and steal from the aerospace sector. I absolutely get there are a lot of people that are very frustrated that, compared to the size of the maritime sector, aerospace seems to get more. I'd say a couple of things that I am going to say quite challenging about the aerospace sector. There are some really big players in the aerospace sector that seem to me to be able to say to government, this is what we'll do it in the UK. If you back us, we'll do it in the UK. If you don't, we won't. So there's quite a threat-based pitch to government. The second element I would say is the aerospace sector is better at really articulating its clear message to government. This is what we need government to support us with. This is the single number almost that we as a sector will get behind. We want, you do that, and we'll then invest in the same way. So I think it's a clarity of message point, I guess is what I would say. But don't get me wrong, because I sound like I'm super impressed by the aerospace sector. I absolutely fundamentally believe that our sector should have that same level of weight and consideration when we're thinking about industrial strategy and we're thinking about the future. So, I absolutely believe we can be there, but there's a couple of reflections that I would have on where I still see aerospace doing well.
Great. Thank you. Paul?
Can I add one into that as well?
Please.
I wonder if this is the one that underlines the importance of a thread that's been discussed a few times, and I saw a question come up about the importance of rebranding shipbuilding. So I grew up in the 70s. I don't remember ever the bad news stories about the strikes and shutdowns and so on in shipyards. Aerospace, for one reason or another, has managed to always retain this sexy image as an industry. And I do think that comes back to one of these pieces for us, which is this collective responsibility to raise our game in terms of talking about the good stuff that goes on. Yeah. And I know there's lots of challenges, and I said from the start, call a thing what it is. But there's a bit about this, which is there is really top-class employment and top-class careers to be had in shipbuilding, and we're simply not getting that across well enough. And if I remember from that question from a rebranding point of view, I think we don't talk about the good stuff enough. Yes. And I look at other industries and I look at what they're doing on social media in terms of the good news stories. Oh, we got asked by a customer on Monday, by Wednesday it looked like this, and here we are Friday morning, it's going on a truck and going out. Yeah. And it's a constant drumbeat of good stuff, meaningful, critical infrastructure that is essential to society. And yet that's what shipbuilding is. I just don't think we're there. And I think we can do that more, and I think it's a part of that question about why is aerospace, had that support and been supported and been able to have those kind of negotiation type stances. We need to get some of our game together for shipbuilding and really stick up for it and make more of it than we are to date.
Yes, fantastic. Bex, did you want to comment?
Noticing the time, if you want to get one more.
No. I'm very interested in hearing your opinion.
I think the key thing, I really recognise that as a thing, and I think we're trying really hard to not just work in our bubble of maritime, but actually see where good practice is, both in the air and the land environment, and how we can pull in those effectively. Yeah. I think it's something we have recognised as well, and we'll work with the NSO to try and work out how to do that.
Fantastic, thank you. Very cognizant of time. Thank you, Darren, for that question. That was a very good one. Thank you. Would anybody else like to provide a question or put a question up? It's getting desperately close to lunchtime. No, I'll take that as a no, thank you. So thank you very much for all your questions on slide 8.
Ladies and gentlemen, the incident alert is now over. We would like to apologise for any inconvenience caused. I repeat, the incident alert is now over. We would like to apologise for any inconvenience caused. Thank you.
Ah, there we go. A couple of minutes later, we would have got away with it.
I actually asked him to do that 25 minutes ago, but it didn't happen.
Phew. So time and tide and all that. So thank you very much for your questions. The Slido questions we have. If you would like answers to those Slido questions, we can also take those away and provide some written answers for you as well, because I realise that there's thought, consideration that have gone into those questions. So, it's important for us to respond to those as well. If you'd like to, obviously if they're anonymous, it's quite difficult for us to give the responses to, but we will aggregate those as well and answer them as we can. A very big round of applause, I think, for our panellists here. Thank you. Thank you, and also for our panellists in the audience who weren't upstage. Thank you very much for your consciousness this morning. The questions, engaging in the Slido, some very good questions, and I think a very honest, open, and actually very fresh. It feels like the starter gun is about to go off and we're on the blocks, and that's actually a very exciting place to be. So thank you very much indeed. We're now breaking for lunch, and I would say that we're going to be joining the decarbonisation session after lunch. So if you could please, 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 we've got a heck of a lot to pack into decarbonised shipping. So if you could please make it back on time promptly, that would be very much appreciated. Thank you very much indeed.